Nobody talks about the foods America quietly pulled from kitchen tables while the rest of the world kept eating them. From banned cheeses to outlawed fruits, these dishes were erased by regulation, fear, and shifting politics. Here are 30 foods America banned that other countries still enjoy today. Sassafras root beer was once America's most beloved homemade soft drink, a sweet, earthy brew made from bark and roots of sassafras trees growing wild across the eastern states. Families sipped it at county fairs, front porches, and picnics, its flavor unlike anything on the market. The key ingredient was saffrole, the aromatic oil giving sassafras its signature warmth. In 1960, the FDA declared saffrole a carcinogen after rats developed liver tumors when given massive doses far beyond normal human consumption. The ban forced every root beer manufacturer to reformulate with artificial flavoring, fundamentally changing the taste of America's classic soda. Sassafras remains legal across parts of Europe, Asia, and South America, where it flavors teas, candies, and medicines without restriction. The root beer Americans drink today carries only a shadow of its original flavor, a sanitized version of something that once tasted like the countryside itself. Cyclamate sweetened sodas dominated the American diet drink market through the 1960s, offering calorie-free sweetness rivaling sugar in satisfaction. This artificial sweetener appeared in diet colas, canned fruit, and children's vitamins, controlling roughly 30% of the sweetener market by 1968. Families trusted it as a modern miracle, all the sweetness without the calories. In 1969, a study linked cyclamate to bladder cancer in rats, and the FDA banned it entirely. The decision forced manufacturers to scramble for alternatives. What makes this ban remarkable is that over 50 countries, including Canada, the European Union, and most of Asia, never followed suit. They reviewed the same science and concluded cyclamate was safe at normal consumption levels. Today, it remains one of the most widely used artificial sweeteners on the planet, found in diet drinks across the globe, while Americans have never tasted it again. Red dye number 2 gave American candies, cereals, and sodas their vibrant crimson color through the 1960s and early 1970s. So common it appeared in everything from Kool-Aid to hot dog casings. Children ate brightly colored treats without a thought, and manufacturers relied on it to make products irresistible. The controversy erupted when scientists suggested the dye might cause cancer and birth defects in animals. Though results were inconclusive, the FDA banned it in 1976 under the Delaney Clause, prohibiting any additive shown to cause cancer in animals regardless of dosage. The ban panicked candy manufacturers, who quickly reformulated, and some temporarily stopped producing red-colored items. The European Union, Canada, and dozens of nations kept amaranth legal, where it continues coloring foods and cosmetics without restriction. America's precautionary approach cost consumers a common coloring that much of the world still considers perfectly safe. Haggis was a familiar dish in Scottish-American communities, a savory pudding of minced sheep organs mixed with oatmeal, onions, and spices, encased in the animal's stomach lining. Scottish immigrants brought their national dish during waves of immigration, serving it at Burns night suppers, Highland games, and family celebrations. The dish carried deep cultural significance, representing Scottish identity and the tradition of using every part of the animal. In 1971, the USDA ruled livestock lungs could not be saved for human consumption, effectively banning authentic haggis because sheep lung is essential. The regulations cited concerns that lungs could harbor contaminants inhaled during the animal's lifetime. Scottish Americans were forced to smuggle haggis or settle for modified versions without lung, which purists consider unacceptable. Scotland and the United Kingdom continue celebrating haggis as a national treasure, the centerpiece of Burns Night enjoyed by millions every January. Unpasteurized young cheeses like authentic Camembert de Normandie and Brie de Meaux were once available to American cheese lovers seeking imported European varieties. These raw milk cheeses, aged fewer than 60 days, carried complex flavors pasteurized versions could not replicate, with living cultures creating textures that evolved from purchase to plate. French cheesemakers had perfected these recipes over centuries. The FDA's 60-day aging rule banned these cheeses from American markets, citing concerns about bacteria like Listeria and Salmonella. Americans could only purchase pasteurized imitations or older cheeses aged past the threshold. France, Italy, and Switzerland consider these cheeses essential cultural heritage, protected by law and celebrated at markets and family tables without restriction. The ban remains among the most debated food regulations in America, with lovers arguing centuries of safe European consumption prove the caution excessive. Horsemeat appeared on American tables more often than most realize, particularly during both world wars when beef was rationed and families needed affordable protein. Butcher shops in cities with large European immigrant populations openly sold it, and French, Belgian, Italian, and Japanese communities considered it a lean, nutritious alternative. The meat was red, slightly sweet, and tender when prepared correctly. Beginning in the 1970s, cultural sentiment against eating horses, viewed increasingly as companions, led to legislative actions making horse slaughter for consumption effectively impossible. Congress defunded USDA inspection of slaughter facilities, and several states passed outright bans. France, Belgium, Italy, Japan, and dozens of countries consume horse meat regularly, selling it in dedicated shops and serving it as tartare, steaks, and cured meats. Americans export thousands of horses annually to Canada and Mexico for slaughter, yet cannot eat the meat themselves. Ackee fruit was a familiar ingredient in Caribbean-American kitchens across Miami and New York. A bright red and yellow fruit with creamy, buttery flesh, perfect for Jamaica's national dish of ackee and saltfish. Families who grew up eating this staple naturally wanted to continue preparing it in America. The fruit carries a dangerous secret. When unripe, ackee contains hypoglycin A, a toxin causing violent vomiting, seizures, and potentially fatal drops in blood sugar. The FDA banned fresh ackee importation entirely, citing difficulty ensuring every fruit was properly ripened. Only specially processed canned ackee from approved facilities is permitted, and even those face rigorous inspection and frequent rejection. Jamaica and much of the Caribbean continue eating fresh ackee daily. Families know how to identify ripe fruit safely, knowledge passed through generations. The ban separates an entire immigrant community from their most culturally significant food. Casu Marzu cheese was a delicacy Sardinian-American families whispered about. A pecorino deliberately infested with live insect larvae that broke down fats into an intensely flavored, almost liquid spread. The larvae gave Casu Marzu its characteristic soft texture and sharp flavor devotees described as unforgettable. Making it required patience. Wheels of pecorino were left open for cheese flies to lay eggs, and larvae digested the hard cheese from within over weeks. The FDA banned it under regulations prohibiting foods containing insects, classifying it as adulterated and unfit for consumption. Health concerns centered on the possibility that larvae could survive stomach acid and cause intestinal damage. Sardinia and parts of Corsica continue producing Casu Marzu as a treasured tradition, though even the European Union has complicated its legal status. Those who have tasted it describe an experience challenging every assumption about cheese, intensely alive and irreplaceable. Absinthe was the drink of American bohemians and European immigrants, a potent anise-flavored spirit that turned cloudy when diluted with water through elaborate rituals involving sugar cubes and slotted spoons. Distilled from wormwood, anise, and fennel, it carried a mystique no other spirit could match. The controversy centered on thujon, a compound blamed for hallucinations and violent behavior. Claims modern science has largely debunked. America banned absinthe in 1912, and the prohibition survived nearly a century, outlasting alcohol prohibition itself. When finally re-legalized in 2007, the FDA imposed strict limits requiring less than 10 parts per million of thujon, a standard traditional European versions often exceed. France, Switzerland, and the Czech Republic never abandoned their traditions, producing full-strength versions Americans cannot legally purchase. The absinthe in American liquor stores today is a tamed version, legal but stripped of the compound that defined its legendary reputation. Kinder Surprise eggs were the chocolate treasure every American child returning from European vacation begged to smuggle through customs. A hollow chocolate egg containing a plastic capsule with a collectible toy inside. Since their 1974 invention in Italy, billions sold annually across Europe, Asia, and South America. Children loved the combination of chocolate and surprise, and collecting the toys became a multi-generational hobby. America banned them under the 1938 Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act, which prohibits non-nutritive objects embedded within food, a regulation designed to prevent choking hazards. Customs agents confiscated tens of thousands from travelers' luggage, treating beloved candy like contraband. The manufacturer created Kinder Joy for America, separating chocolate from toy. But enthusiasts insist it cannot compare. Over 100 countries sell authentic Kinder Surprise eggs without incident, making this one of the most puzzling food prohibitions on the planet. Brominated vegetable oil hid inside America's favorite citrus sodas for decades, a modified oil laced with bromine that kept fruit flavoring evenly distributed in drinks like Mountain Dew and Gatorade. Consumers had no idea they were sipping a substance also used in flame retardants. The FDA classified it as safe in the 1950s, but by the 1970s, studies revealed neurological damage, thyroid disruption, and bromine accumulating in tissue. Despite mounting evidence, the FDA merely set temporary limits rather than banning it. It took California passing its own food safety law in 2023 to force the FDA's hand. The federal ban took effect in August 2024, over 50 years after the first warnings. Japan and the European Union had prohibited it years earlier, reformulating the same brands Americans were still drinking. PepsiCo voluntarily removed it long before the ban, proving safer alternatives existed all along. Epoisses cheese carried a reputation so powerful that French law banned it from public transportation. Its pungent aroma could clear an entire train car. This washed-rind cheese from Burgundy was made with raw cow's milk and bathed in Marc de Bourgogne brandy during aging, developing an orange crust and creamy interior with flavors ranging from earthy to intensely barnyard. Napoleon reportedly declared it his favorite cheese. The FDA's prohibition on raw milk cheeses aged fewer than 60 days locked Epoisses out of America, since authentic versions require shorter aging periods falling below the threshold. Pasteurized versions exist but lack the complexity raw milk provides. France continues celebrating Epoisses as a protected cultural treasure, served at dinner parties where its bold presence commands the table. For American cheese lovers, it remains the forbidden fruit of the dairy world. Foie gras was once a fixture on upscale American menus, fattened liver of force-fed ducks or geese, pan-seared golden outside and custard soft within, served with brioche and fruit compote. French Nouvelle Cuisine brought it to American dining in the 1970s, and chefs considered it among the most luxurious ingredients available. The production process involves inserting a tube into the bird's throat and pumping grain directly into its stomach multiple times daily, enlarging the liver to 10 times its natural size. Animal welfare advocates launched aggressive campaigns, and California banned its sale in 2004, taking full effect in 2012. Other states followed with restrictions. France, Hungary, and Spain continue producing foie gras without apology, considering it essential culinary heritage protected by tradition and law. The debate remains fierce. Chefs call it art, while activists call it cruelty. Kangaroo meat was available in American specialty shops until California banned its sale in 1973 under legislation signed by Governor Ronald Reagan, citing growing concerns over animal welfare and declining wild populations in Australia. The ban spread and effectively removed kangaroo from American tables. The irony is that Australia itself encourages kangaroo consumption. The animals are so abundant they're considered pests, and their meat is sold in every major supermarket. Kangaroo is exceptionally lean, high in protein, and lower in cholesterol than beef. The meat tastes similar to venison, rich, slightly gamey, and best served rare to prevent toughness. European countries import Australian kangaroo regularly, and it appears on menus from London to Berlin. Americans who travel to Australia try kangaroo steaks and wonder why such a sustainable, nutritious protein remains forbidden at home. Fugu puffer fish was the ultimate forbidden delicacy, a Japanese tradition where one wrong cut by the chef could kill the diner within hours. The fish contains tetrodotoxin in its liver, ovaries, and skin, a poison 1,200 times more lethal than cyanide with no known antidote. In Japan, chefs train for years and pass rigorous licensing examinations before preparing fugu, served as translucent sashimi, in hot pots, or as fried skin chips. The FDA effectively banned importation, except under limited permits few restaurants obtain. Japan consumes thousands of tons annually, and while rare fatalities occur from amateur preparation, licensed restaurants maintain extraordinary safety records. The thrill of eating fugu lies partly in the danger, a culinary experience Americans can only access by traveling abroad. It represents the ultimate collision between food culture and government caution. Beluga caviar was the crown jewel of American luxury dining. Tiny pearl gray eggs from beluga sturgeon in the Caspian Sea, served on mother-of-pearl spoons with champagne at the finest restaurants. A single ounce cost hundreds of dollars, yet demand seemed limitless through the 20th century. That insatiable appetite drove sturgeon populations toward extinction. In 2005, the United States banned all beluga caviar imports under the Endangered Species Act. The ban aimed to reduce demand and give sturgeon time to recover in Russia, Iran, and Kazakhstan. Those countries continue producing beluga caviar under increasingly strict international quotas. American enthusiasts turn to domestic alternatives like paddlefish and hackleback roe, but connoisseurs insist nothing matches the delicate, buttery pop of authentic beluga, a taste that became America's most expensive casualty of conservation. Bird's nest soup was a cherished delicacy in Chinese-American communities, made from the hardened saliva of cave-dwelling swiftlet birds, prized in Chinese medicine as a source of vitality and beauty. The nests were harvested from cliffsides across Southeast Asia, cleaned and simmered into gelatinous soup with subtle sweetness. A single pound of premium nests could cost thousands of dollars. The FDA restricted importation, citing concerns about avian influenza viruses potentially harbored in unprocessed nests, and processed versions must meet strict safety standards limiting availability. China, Hong Kong, Singapore, and Malaysia consume bird's nest regularly, sold in restaurants, specialty shops, and as bottled health drinks in convenience stores. For Chinese Americans, the restriction represents another barrier between their tables and the cultural foodways that define their heritage. Trans-fat margarine was the butter substitute America embraced for decades before discovering it was quietly killing people. Introduced as a healthier alternative to animal fats, margarine made with partially hydrogenated oils dominated kitchens from the 1950s through the 1990s. Families spread it on toast and baked with it, believing they were making the heart-healthy choice doctors recommended. By 1977, Americans consumed 7 pounds of margarine per person annually. Then research revealed artificial trans fats dramatically increased heart disease risk, raising bad cholesterol while lowering good cholesterol devastatingly. The FDA banned artificial trans fats in 2018, ending decades of consumption. Denmark had already banned them in 2003, and the European Union followed with strict limits. Many countries still permit trans fats at varying levels, though the global trend moves toward elimination. The margarine Americans trusted turned out to be among the most dangerous everyday foods ever sold. Mirabelle plums never appeared in American grocery stores despite being one of France's most treasured fruits, small golden orbs with honey-sweet flesh that practically melted on the tongue. These delicate plums grow exclusively in Lorraine, northeastern France, where specific soil and climate produce fruit unlike anything elsewhere. French families eagerly await Mirabelle season each August, eating them fresh, baking them into tarts, and distilling them into brandy. The plums carry protected geographic origin status, similar to champagne, meaning only Lorraine fruit can bear the name. American import regulations prevent their entry, not because they're dangerous, but because trade restrictions and extreme perishability make legal importation impractical. By the time fresh Mirabelles cleared customs, they'd be past their prime. France produces roughly 15,000 tons annually, and neighboring countries enjoy them freely during the brief summer season Americans can only read about. Bushmeat, wild game from African forests including antelope, monkey, porcupine, and cane rat, was a protein source West African immigrants in American cities desperately missed. These were not exotic curiosities, but everyday foods central to cultural celebrations and daily nutrition across sub-Saharan Africa. Smoked duiker carried memories of village life, and peppered grasscutter recalled family gatherings no supermarket protein could replace. Federal law prohibits importing bushmeat, citing endangered species protection and zoonotic disease risks including Ebola and monkeypox. Customs agents regularly intercept smuggled bushmeat at airports, particularly on flights from West Africa. Across the African continent, bushmeat remains a vital protein source for millions, sold openly in markets and prepared in traditional recipes. The ban forces immigrant communities to abandon foods carrying generations of cultural memory. Shark fin soup was a centerpiece of Chinese-American banquet culture for generations, served at weddings, Lunar New Year celebrations, and business dinners as a symbol of wealth, honor, and respect for guests. The translucent fins were simmered into a rich broth thickened with starch, their gelatinous texture prized more than flavor. A single bowl could cost over $100 at upscale restaurants in cities like San Francisco and New York. The practice of shark finning, slicing fins from living sharks and discarding the bodies back into the ocean, drew fierce opposition from conservation groups who documented the devastating impact on global shark populations. Multiple states banned the sale and possession of shark fins, with California's 2011 ban among the most significant given its large Chinese-American population. China, Hong Kong, and much of Southeast Asia continue serving shark fin soup at formal occasions, though declining populations and growing awareness have reduced demand even there. Sassafras tea was a folk remedy and everyday beverage across rural America for centuries. Brewed from the aromatic root bark of the sassafras tree and sipped for everything from spring tonics to cold relief. Families gathered roots from forests and backyards, boiling them into a fragrant reddish tea that tasted warm, spicy, and faintly sweet. Native Americans introduced the practice to European settlers, and it became embedded in Appalachian and Southern traditions. The FDA banned sassafras bark from commercial tea products in the 1970s after confirming that safrole caused liver cancer in laboratory animals. Only safrole-free extract is now permitted in commercial products. Many countries never imposed similar restrictions, and sassafras tea continues in parts of Central America, the Caribbean, and Asia. In rural Appalachia, some families still quietly brew it from wild-gathered roots, keeping alive a tradition the government tried to end. Red dye number 4 was another synthetic coloring Americans consumed freely before regulators pulled it from shelves. Used primarily in maraschino cherries and certain candies, this dye gave foods an appealing bright red that consumers associated with freshness. Like its cousin red number 2, it faced scrutiny as scientists investigated artificial colorings during the 1960s and 1970s. Studies raised concerns about potential links to adrenal gland damage in animal testing. The FDA banned it in 1976, the same year it prohibited red number 2, sending the food coloring industry into rapid reformulation. Maraschino cherry producers switched to red number 40, which remains legal but controversial today. Several countries continued permitting red number 4 in limited applications, viewing animal study results as insufficient for a complete ban. The episode demonstrated how America's precautionary approach could diverge sharply from the world's assessment of identical data. Ortolan bunting was a tiny songbird that became the most controversial dish in French gastronomy, captured alive, fattened in dark boxes on millet and figs until doubled in size, then drowned in Armagnac brandy before being roasted whole. Diners traditionally ate the bird in a single bite, bones and all, covering their heads with napkins, some said to concentrate the aromas, others to hide the indulgence from God. The flavor was described as an explosion of fat, gamey meat, and brandy-soaked organs unlike anything else in cuisine. The United States never formally permitted the hunting or sale of ortolans, and the Migratory Bird Treaty Act effectively prohibited their importation. France banned ortolan hunting in 1999 under European wildlife protection laws, though enforcement was notoriously lax, and the tradition persisted in secret among gourmands. The dish represents the extreme edge of culinary culture, where tradition, cruelty, and extraordinary flavor collide in ways most modern diners find impossible to reconcile. Alar-treated apples were an American grocery staple through the 1970s and 1980s, sprayed with diminozide, a chemical growth regulator that kept apples firm, red, and visually perfect on supermarket shelves. Families fed these apples to children without hesitation, packing them in lunchboxes and pressing them into juice consumed daily. The chemical allowed fruit to stay on the tree longer, developing deeper color while resisting bruising. Investigations during the 1970s suggested alar was likely carcinogenic, but the FDA took no nationwide action. Individual states and baby food companies began voluntarily banning alar-treated fruit. It wasn't until a devastating 1989 expose on 60 Minutes that public outrage forced the EPA to ban it entirely, cratering apple sales nationwide. Several countries had already restricted its use, while others continued permitting it at lower concentrations, creating a patchwork of regulation around a chemical American children had consumed for decades. Blood pudding with lung was a traditional dish across Northern European immigrant communities in America, combining pig or sheep blood with grains, spices, and organ meats, including lung, into dense, savory sausages or loaves that were sliced and fried for breakfast. German, Swedish, and British families brought these recipes to the United States during immigration waves, considering them essential comfort food tied to cultural identity and the principle of using every part of the animal. The USDA's 1971 ban on livestock lungs for human consumption didn't just affect haggis, it effectively outlawed any traditional dish containing lung as an ingredient. Blood pudding itself remained legal in modified forms, but versions containing lung disappeared from American butcher shops and kitchens. Throughout Europe, blood pudding with lung remains a celebrated tradition. Black pudding in Britain, Blutwurst in Germany, and similar preparations across Scandinavia appear in markets and restaurants without controversy. Whale meat was consumed in American coastal communities for centuries, particularly in New England, where whaling families ate the catch alongside selling oil and baleen. The meat was dark, rich, and intensely flavored, often compared to beef, but with a distinctly marine character. As industrial whaling drove species toward extinction, international pressure mounted. The United States banned commercial whaling in 1971 and supported the International Whaling Commission's 1986 moratorium. Only select Alaska Native communities retain rights to hunt bowhead whales for subsistence. Japan, Norway, and Iceland continued whaling despite criticism, and whale meat remains available in their restaurants and markets. Japanese supermarkets stock whale sashimi alongside tuna, and Norwegian families prepare traditional whale stew. The ban divided cultural perspectives, conservation necessity to Americans, culinary heritage to nations that never stopped eating it. Raw milk was the only milk Americans knew before pasteurization became widespread in the early 20th century. Fresh from the cow, rich with cream, and carrying flavors that varied with the seasons and what the animals grazed on. Families bought it directly from local dairies or kept their own cows, drinking milk that tasted profoundly different from the homogenized, heat-treated product that eventually replaced it. As concerns about tuberculosis, brucellosis, and other milk-borne diseases grew, states began mandating pasteurization. A federal judge banned interstate sale of raw milk in 1973, and today, the patchwork of state regulations makes purchasing it difficult or impossible in much of America. France, Switzerland, and many European countries sell raw milk freely, from vending machines on street corners to dedicated sections in supermarkets. Advocates argue that raw milk contains beneficial enzymes and bacteria destroyed by pasteurization, while the FDA maintains it poses unacceptable health risks. Unpasteurized fruit juice was once simply called juice, pressed fresh from apples and oranges without heat treatment, sold at roadside stands, farmers markets, and small producers across America. Families considered fresh-pressed cider a seasonal treasure, visiting orchards each autumn to bring home gallons of cloudy, unfiltered juice bursting with flavor. Pasteurized versions couldn't match. Outbreaks of E. coli and salmonella traced to unpasteurized apple cider in the 1990s prompted the FDA to require warning labels and eventually mandate pasteurization for most commercial juice. Small producers faced expensive equipment requirements that drove many out of business. Much of Europe, South America, and Asia continues selling fresh, unpasteurized juices without equivalent restrictions, and street vendors press sugarcane and exotic fruit to order. The regulations protected health but eliminated a tradition of fresh-pressed flavor many Americans remember with nostalgia. Potassium bromate was an additive baked into American bread for decades, a chemical oxidizer that strengthened dough, helped it rise higher, and gave loaves the soft, uniform texture consumers expected from commercial bakeries. Nearly every major bread manufacturer used it because the results were consistent and the cost was minimal. Studies beginning in the 1980s linked potassium bromate to kidney tumors and thyroid cancer in laboratory animals, prompting the European Union, United Kingdom, Canada, Brazil, and China to ban it from food production. The FDA never formally prohibited potassium bromate, but issued guidance in 1991 urging manufacturers to stop using it voluntarily. Many large bakeries complied, but the additive remains technically legal in American bread to this day. California requires cancer warning labels on products containing it. The contrast is stark. A substance banned across most of the developed world still sits quietly in some American bread, protected by regulatory inaction rather than scientific endorsement. Resting meat after cooking before slicing was an instinctive practice. 1970s cooks followed that impatient modern methods tried to eliminate. After pulling a roast from the oven, women let meat sit on cutting boards covered loosely with foil for 5 to 20 minutes. The reasoning was simple. Meat cut too soon released all its juices onto the plate, leaving dry, tough results. Fast-paced modern cooking pushed the idea that hot food needed immediate serving. But food scientists have proven exactly what 1970s cooks observed through experience. During cooking, muscle fibers contract and push moisture toward the center. Resting allows fibers to relax and reabsorb liquid, redistributing juices throughout the meat. Studies using thermal imaging confirm that properly rested meat retains significantly more juice when sliced. The patience that 1970s grandmothers practiced created demonstrably better results than rushing food to the table. This hack cost nothing but time, yet it transformed ordinary roasts into succulent meals. Frankfurters with natural casings appeared regularly on cafeteria menus, served in soft white buns with mustard and sometimes relish. These hot dogs snapped when bitten, the natural casing giving way to seasoned beef and pork that tasted like actual meat. The nitrates used for preservation became controversial in later decades, with health authorities warning about cancer risks that subsequent research has largely failed to confirm. Those preservatives prevented bacterial growth and created the characteristic cured flavor that made hot dogs satisfying. School lunch programs served millions of these frankfurters weekly without the hand-wringing that would come later. The protein was real, the portions were appropriate, and children ate them willingly. Modern science has softened considerably on nitrate concerns, noting that vegetables contain far higher levels than processed meats and that the cancer risk was dramatically overstated. Homemade gelatin from bones was the foundation of aspics and desserts before Knox and Jell-O reduced this ancient food to flavored powder in paper boxes. Cooks extracted gelatin by simmering bones and cartilage for hours until collagen dissolved into liquid that set firm when chilled. This natural gelatin had nutritional properties processed versions lacked, supporting joint health and aiding digestion. Savory aspics showcased cold meats in glistening clarity, while fruit desserts wobbled with homemade purity. Gelatin companies marketed convenience, packaging their product with artificial colors that transformed gelatin into children's party food rather than nourishment. Making real gelatin required bones that butchers stopped saving once demand disappeared and time modern schedules supposedly couldn't spare. Within 2 generations, the skill vanished so completely that most Americans don't realize gelatin comes from animals. The artificially green desserts dominating potlucks bear no resemblance to grandmother's rich creations. Nixtamalization was the ancient process of soaking dried corn in wood ashlie water that Appalachian families learned from Cherokee neighbors and practiced for generations. The process involved mixing hardwood ashes with water to create an alkaline solution, then soaking dried corn kernels until the tough outer hulls loosened and slipped away. What seemed like primitive folk cooking was actually sophisticated chemistry that modern nutritionists now celebrate. The lye treatment released niacin otherwise locked inside the corn, preventing pellagra, a devastating disease that plagued communities eating untreated cornmeal. The alkaline bath also increased calcium and improved protein quality by making amino acids more bioavailable. Mountain families who continued this practice never suffered the nutritional deficiencies striking populations eating refined corn. Scientists now study this exact process, calling it one of the most important food innovations in human history. Those grandmothers stirring ash water were performing biochemistry. Cooking with lard instead of vegetable shortening was standard practice in 1970s kitchens that health campaigns later demonized. Rendered pork fat created the flakiest pie crusts, the crispiest fried chicken, and the most tender biscuits. Women kept containers of home-rendered lard or bought it by the pound from butchers who understood its value. The anti-saturated fat crusade pushed families toward vegetable shortening and margarine, marketed as heart-healthy alternatives. But these industrial substitutes contained trans fats that proved far more dangerous than natural fats. Scientists now acknowledge that trans fats cause the very heart problems they were supposed to prevent, while natural lard has been rehabilitated. Studies show lard contains less saturated fat than butter and more heart-healthy monounsaturated fat than previously recognized. The crispy results 1970s cooks achieved came from a product that was never the villain health authorities claimed. Industrial processing creates problems while claiming to solve them. White bread rolls fresh from the oven accompanied nearly every hot lunch served in 1970s cafeterias. These soft, pillowy rounds of refined flour were everything whole grain advocates would later condemn, yet they provided calories, comfort, and carbohydrates that active children burned through by afternoon recess. Cafeteria workers baked them on site in many districts, filling hallways with aromas that made children actually anticipate lunch. The bread was tender, slightly sweet, and perfect for soaking up gravy or spreading with butter. When whole grain mandates arrived, schools replaced these beloved rolls with dense brown alternatives that children threw away in alarming quantities. The white bread had been doing its job, delivering energy and satisfaction to children who needed both. Modern nutritional science acknowledges that refined grains in moderate amounts pose no particular health threat to active growing children. Homemade vinegar was a continuous process in farmhouse kitchens before Heinz standardized acidity and convinced Americans that only factory-produced vinegar was safe. Families maintained vinegar mothers, gelatinous cultures that transformed wine, cider, or alcoholic liquids into tangy vinegar over weeks of fermentation. These mothers were shared among neighbors, passed through generations, and treated as valuable assets. The resulting vinegars carried complex flavors: apple cider that tasted of autumn orchards, wine vinegar with grape undertones, malt vinegar with toasty depth. Commercial companies marketed standardization, implying homemade versions might harbor dangerous bacteria or produce inconsistent results. Their products were cheap, uniform, and utterly lacking character. The vinegar mothers died when families stopped feeding them, and the knowledge of maintaining them passed from practice. Today, artisan vinegars command premium prices for what every household once produced from kitchen scraps and thyme. Haybox cooking was the ingenious method where mountain women would bring a pot to boil, then nestle it inside boxes stuffed with hay, quilts, or sawdust, and let residual heat finish cooking over hours without additional fuel. Scientists studying thermal retention now recognize this as remarkably efficient energy technology that modern slow cookers replicate with electricity. The insulation held temperatures in safe cooking range while allowing tough cuts and dried beans to tenderize slowly. Families who couldn't afford constant wood or coal used this method to produce stews, porridges, and braised meats requiring hours of cooking. Modern engineers study these principles for off-grid cooking solutions. The technique also prevented nutrient loss occurring with prolonged high-heat cooking, preserving vitamins that would otherwise break down. Contemporary chefs now use similar techniques under fancy names like passive cooking. Making bone broth from leftover carcasses was a cornerstone of 1970s thrift cooking that fell out of fashion as convenience foods took over. After roasting a chicken or cooking a ham, nothing went to waste. Bones went into large stock pots with vegetable scraps covered with water and simmered for hours until the liquid turned rich and golden. This broth became the foundation for soups, gravies, and sauces that stretched meals further. Modern processed bouillon cubes promised convenience but delivered only salt and artificial flavors. Food manufacturers convinced families that homemade stock was unnecessary work. But scientists have confirmed that properly made bone broth contains collagen, glycine, and minerals that support gut health and reduce inflammation. The gelatin released during long simmering provides amino acids that commercial products cannot match. What 1970s cooks understood intuitively, that slow-simmered bones created something nourishing, has been validated by modern nutrition research. Chocolate milk with real sugar and cocoa was the reward every child hoped for during lunch period. This wasn't the artificially sweetened, chemically flavored version that would come later. This was real cocoa powder mixed with whole milk and cane sugar, creating something that tasted like dessert but delivered genuine nutrition. Cafeteria workers mixed it in large batches, the dark sweetness swirling into the white milk until it turned that perfect shade of brown. Children who finished their vegetables often received chocolate milk as encouragement, a system that worked because the drink was genuinely delicious. When the sugar wars began, chocolate milk became a casualty despite the fact that its sugar content was minimal compared to the sodas children would drink at home. Scientists now argue that chocolate milk's combination of protein, calcium, and carbohydrates makes it superior to most alternatives. The sugar helped children actually consume the milk, which was the entire point. Fresh ground peanut butter was what families spread on bread before Skippy and Jif convinced America that hydrogenated, sugar-laden paste was superior. General stores had grinders where customers watched roasted peanuts transform into butter before their eyes. Nothing added but perhaps a pinch of salt. The texture was rough, the oil separated and required stirring, and the flavor was intensely nutty with none of the cloying sweetness of commercial brands. Children grew up knowing what peanuts actually tasted like. Big brands changed everything by adding hydrogenated oils to prevent separation and sugar to appeal to developing palates. Their smooth product was marketed as modern, while the grinding machines disappeared from stores. Generations grew up believing peanut butter should taste like candy, and that oil separation indicated spoilage. The simple pleasure of real peanut butter, earthy, rich, and honest, became foreign to Americans raised on processed spreads engineered for shelf stability rather than flavor. Lacto-fermentation in stoneware crocks was how mountain families preserved vegetables through long winters without refrigeration, using salt, water, and thyme to transform cabbage into sauerkraut and cucumbers into pickles. Scientists now understand this process cultivates beneficial bacteria, lactobacillus strains that modern probiotic supplements attempt to replicate. The fermentation creates lactic acid, preserving food naturally while producing vitamins and compounds supporting gut health. Research confirms that traditional fermented vegetables contain bacterial diversity commercial probiotics cannot match. Mountain families who ate sauerkraut with every winter meal, who drank pickle brine for stomach troubles, were practicing preventive medicine. The cool root cellars where crocks sat bubbling provided perfect fermentation temperatures that modern enthusiasts carefully monitor with thermometers. What seemed like primitive preservation was actually sophisticated biotechnology. Using cast iron skillets for everything from cornbread to fried chicken was the backbone of 1970s cooking that non-stick coatings tried to replace. Heavy black pans passed down through generations sat on every stove, their surfaces seasoned by decades of use into naturally slick cooking surfaces. Women knew cast iron distributed heat evenly and could go from stovetop to oven without hesitation. When non-stick cookware arrived promising easy cleanup, many families abandoned their cast iron. But science has revealed troubling truths about those convenient coatings. When overheated, they release toxic fumes, and their chemical compounds have been linked to health concerns. Meanwhile, cast iron has been vindicated completely. Studies show it adds dietary iron to food, lasts multiple lifetimes with proper care, and creates superior browning. The seasoning process creates a natural non-stick surface without chemicals. What 1970s cooks treasured has proven scientifically superior to modern alternatives. Beef tallow French fries represented a golden age of cafeteria cooking that health reformers dismantled with devastating efficiency. Those fries emerged from deep fryers filled with rendered beef fat, a cooking medium that McDonald's itself used until 1990. The exterior shattered with each bite while the interior remained fluffy and potato pure. School cooks received blocks of beef tallow from suppliers who understood that this was simply how frying was done. The fat created a crispy exterior that vegetable oils could never replicate, sealing the potato and preventing grease absorption. When the anti-saturated fat movement reached its peak, schools switched to partially hydrogenated vegetable oils, which we now know contained trans fats far more dangerous than anything in beef tallow. Those original fries were actually the healthier option. The tallow produced superior texture, better flavor, and posed no cardiovascular risk that modern science can identify. The switch to vegetable shortening created the actual health crisis. Rendered bacon fat cooking was standard practice before the edible oil industry convinced the public that seed oils were healthier. Every farmhouse kept a coffee can beside the stove where bacon drippings were carefully saved after each breakfast. This golden fat became the foundation of countless dishes. Fried eggs sliding across its surface, green beans sautéed until silky, cornbread enriched with smoky depth. The flavor was irreplaceable, adding richness no vegetable oil could match. Wesson and Mazola launched campaigns in the 1960s demonizing animal fats while promoting corn and soybean oils as heart-healthy choices. Home economists funded by these companies taught a generation that bacon grease was poison. The truth emerged decades later. Those polyunsaturated oils oxidized when heated, creating compounds far more harmful than stable saturated fats. By then, the bacon grease crocks had been thrown away, and the knowledge of seasoning cast iron with animal fat had faded from memory entirely. Smoke preservation in small wooden smokehouses transformed fresh meat into shelf-stable protein lasting through seasons without refrigeration, using nothing but hardwood smoke and thyme. Food scientists understand that smoking deposits phenolic compounds, organic acids, and carbonyl compounds inhibiting bacterial growth while creating antioxidant protection. The slow, cold smoking techniques mountain families used, hanging hams and bacon for weeks in cool smoke, created preservation conditions that food safety research confirms prevent pathogen development. The specific woods chosen, hickory, apple, oak, each contributed different antimicrobial compounds families discovered through generations of experience. Researchers now document that properly smoked meats remain safe for months at temperatures that would quickly spoil fresh meat. The smokehouses standing in every farmyard represented food security technology refined over centuries. Commercial processors now replicate these techniques but cannot fully match them. Saving bacon grease in a tin on the back of the stove was one of the most essential kitchen practices in 1970s households that health authorities once condemned as dangerous. Families kept small metal containers near the stove, carefully straining hot bacon drippings through cheesecloth after every breakfast. The golden fat collected over weeks became a cooking staple more valuable than store-bought oils. Women used it to fry eggs, season vegetables, make gravy, and add richness to cornbread batter. Modern nutritionists spent decades warning against saturated fats, pushing families toward processed vegetable oils instead. But recent research has reversed this thinking. Studies now show that natural animal fats contain essential vitamins and may actually be healthier than the chemically processed alternatives. The bacon grease tin represented the waste-nothing philosophy that sustained families through lean times. Scientists now confirm what grandmothers always knew: real food beats factory-made substitutes. Whole milk in those little glass bottles was the standard beverage in every American school cafeteria before the fat-free revolution changed everything. Each child received an 8-ounce serving of full-fat milk that delivered calcium, protein, and fat-soluble vitamins in their natural proportions. The milk arrived cold from local dairies, often within days of being collected from regional farms. Lunch ladies set bottles on trays without question because nobody had yet decided that saturated fat was the enemy. Children drank it with cookies, sandwiches, and hot meals because that was simply what milk was. The government's dietary guidelines of 1977 marked the beginning of the end, pushing schools toward skim alternatives that stripped away nutrients. Modern research has rehabilitated whole milk entirely, showing that children who drink full-fat dairy maintain healthier weights than those drinking reduced-fat versions. Homemade condensed milk was a pantry staple families prepared before Borden and Carnation monopolized the market with canned versions. The process required nothing more than fresh milk, sugar, and patience, simmering whole milk until it reduced by half while stirring constantly. The result was thick, sweet, and intensely creamy with caramelized depth commercial products couldn't match. Farm families made it during summer when cows produced abundantly, storing it in cool cellars where it kept for weeks. It became the base for fudge, caramel sauce, and sweetened coffee during hard times. Canned milk companies marketed convenience, implying homemade versions were unreliable and potentially dangerous without factory sterilization. Their advertising suggested only the uneducated still bothered with old-fashioned methods. Within decades, the simple skill of reducing milk disappeared from common knowledge, replaced entirely by pull-tab cans. Those who taste the homemade version discover a richness that makes commercial products seem flat. Root cellar food storage represented centuries of accumulated knowledge about temperature, humidity, and air circulation that modern scientists now study with sophisticated instruments. Mountain families dug into hillsides, creating naturally climate-controlled spaces, maintaining temperatures between 32 and 40 degrees year-round. These underground chambers kept potatoes from sprouting, apples from softening, and root vegetables from desiccating through entire winters. Food preservation researchers now understand that consistent cool temperatures and high humidity slow respiration and prevent ethylene damage causing deterioration. The layering techniques, storing apples away from potatoes, wrapping vegetables in newspaper, layering carrots in damp sand, reflected understanding of food chemistry textbooks would later confirm. Families maintaining these cool caverns stored enough produce to survive months of isolation. Modern homesteaders now build root cellars using these principles. Real butter pats in foil wrappers accompanied nearly every hot roll, cornbread square, and biscuit that emerged from 1970s cafeteria kitchens. These small rectangles of churned cream represented thousands of years of human nutrition science compressed into convenient individual servings. Children peeled back the wrapper and spread golden fat onto warm bread without anyone suggesting this was dangerous. The butter melted into every crevice, adding richness and satisfaction to meals that might otherwise feel institutional. When margarine replaced butter in the name of heart health, schools unknowingly introduced trans fats that proved genuinely harmful. The butter had been protecting children all along, providing vitamin A, vitamin K2, and healthy saturated fats that growing bodies needed. Modern nutritionists have reversed decades of butter demonization, acknowledging that this whole food never deserved its villainous reputation. Bone broth tonics were the cornerstone of home remedies before bouillon cubes convinced Americans that real broth was too much trouble. Families kept stock pots simmering on wood stoves for days, extracting collagen and minerals from beef knuckles and chicken carcasses that butchers gave away for pennies. The broth turned wobbly when chilled, a sign of nutritional richness, and was used for soups, gravies, and healing drinks for the sick. Mothers served warm cups to children with colds, knowing it soothed throats better than any pharmacy product. Campbell's and Knorr marketed convenience, suggesting busy modern women shouldn't waste time on primitive cooking methods. Their products contained salt and artificial flavors, but almost none of the nutrients that made real broth valuable. The knowledge of proper stock making nearly vanished within 2 generations, replaced by foil-wrapped cubes dissolving into yellow water. Today, bone broth sells as a wellness trend at premium prices for what grandmothers once made from scraps. Water glass egg preservation allowed families to store eggs for months without refrigeration by submerging them in sodium silicate solution that sealed the porous shells completely. This technique, passed through generations of mountain women, kept eggs fresh from spring laying season through winter scarcity when hens stopped producing. Modern food scientists confirm that water glass creates an airtight barrier preventing bacterial contamination and moisture loss while maintaining quality for 6 months or longer. The eggs emerged from their mineral bath looking identical to fresh ones, with yolks standing high and whites holding firm. Commercial facilities now use similar principles, but the chemistry remains what farm wives discovered through necessity. Families practicing this technique never faced winter without eggs for baking or breakfast. The method required no refrigeration, no special equipment beyond a crock, and no ongoing attention. Leaving butter on the counter in a covered dish was universal practice in the 1970s kitchens that health officials later declared unsafe. Families kept butter crocks on countertops where butter stayed soft and spreadable at room temperature. Morning toast got real butter that spread smoothly without tearing bread apart. Refrigeration advocates spent years warning about bacterial growth from room temperature dairy. But scientists now confirm that butter's high fat content and low moisture make it naturally resistant to bacterial contamination. Properly salted butter can safely remain at room temperature for days without spoiling. The USDA has acknowledged that counter butter poses minimal risk when kept covered. What 1970s families knew from practical experience has been validated by food science. Cold butter was difficult to use and often led to more waste as families struggled to spread rock-hard slabs. Room temperature butter was practical, delicious, and perfectly safe all along. Canned fruit cocktail in heavy syrup was dessert disguised as nutrition, and cafeterias served it proudly. Those cubed peaches, pears, grapes, and cherries floated in sugared liquid that made fruit acceptable to children who might otherwise reject it entirely. The syrup was thick, sweet, and genuinely delicious, transforming institutional fruit into something children requested rather than avoided. Lunch ladies spooned generous portions into small bowls, and children ate every bite. When sugar became the new dietary villain, heavy syrup disappeared in favor of fruit packed in juice or water that children largely refused to finish. The original version delivered vitamins, fiber, and the simple pleasure of sweetness that made school lunches bearable. Modern thinking suggests that moderate sugar consumption, particularly attached to actual fruit, poses minimal health risk compared to the processed alternatives children consume today. Cultured butter was the only butter Americans knew before sweet cream butter became the industrialized standard that erased centuries of dairy tradition. Farm wives collected cream over several days, allowing natural bacteria to develop tangy complexity before churning. This fermentation created butter with depth, nuttiness, and slight sourness that enhanced everything, from morning toast to holiday cookies to pan sauces gleaming with golden richness. The buttermilk left behind was equally prized, thick and tangy rather than the thin liquid sold today. Land O'Lakes pushed sweet cream butter because unfermented cream was easier to ship without flavor variation. They marketed freshness while actually removing beneficial cultures that made traditional butter flavorful. Home butter making became associated with poverty rather than quality. The knowledge of culturing cream and churning proper butter faded so completely that European cultured butters now command premium prices. What grandmothers made weekly became imported luxury. Cast iron cooking was dismissed for decades as old-fashioned compared to modern non-stick surfaces, yet scientists now confirm what mountain cooks always knew. These heavy skillets delivered something essential beyond heat. Research proves that acidic foods cooked in cast iron absorb significant dietary iron, sometimes increasing iron content by 20 times or more. Appalachian women who simmered tomatoes, apples, and vinegar-based dishes in seasoned skillets were unknowingly treating iron deficiency anemia that plagued isolated communities. The pans themselves became supplements, leaching bioavailable iron into every pot of greens and every slow-simmered stew. Modern doctors now recommend cast iron cooking for pregnant women and children at risk of anemia. The seasoning process, coating pans with rendered lard and baking until glass smooth, created natural non-stick surfaces without synthetic chemicals researchers now question. Those heavy black skillets passed from mother to daughter carried more than recipes. Fermenting vegetables in crocks on the counter was an ancient preservation method that 1970s families still practiced before commercial canning made it seem unnecessary. Cabbage became sauerkraut, cucumbers became pickles, and vegetables transformed through salt and thyme. Women packed vegetables into ceramic crocks, weighted them down, and let beneficial bacteria work over days or weeks. Food safety regulations discouraged home fermentation, pushing families towards sterile canned goods and vinegar pickles. But modern science has completely reversed this position. Research shows that lacto-fermented vegetables contain probiotics essential for gut health, more bioavailable vitamins than raw vegetables, and natural preservatives that keep food safe without refrigeration. What seemed like old-fashioned kitchen witchcraft has been validated as sophisticated food science humans practiced for thousands of years. The 1970s families who kept fermentation traditions alive were preserving knowledge that modern medicine is only now rediscovering. Creamed corn made from actual cream and butter appeared in serving lines across American schools throughout the 1970s. Cafeteria workers opened industrial-sized cans of corn and transformed them into something rich by adding cream, butter, and sometimes a touch of sugar. The dish was silky, sweet, and satisfying in ways that plain corn never achieved. Children who might refuse vegetables often accepted creamed corn because it tasted almost like dessert. The fat content made it filling, and the preparation made it palatable to even the pickiest eaters. When dietary fat became the enemy, creamed corn disappeared from menus, replaced by plain kernels that children promptly ignored. The irony is that the cream and butter help children actually consume their vegetables while providing fat-soluble vitamin absorption. Removing the richness didn't make children healthier, it just made them eat fewer vegetables altogether. Which banned food surprised you the most? Drop it in the comments. Hit like and subscribe so we can keep uncovering the foods they don't want you to know about.